Hi, I'm Sabrina Rice, your host here on Paradigm Shift, a show which will not only challenge the way that you look at the U.S. and world events, but it will also dare you to face the truth. Each week we will present a different topic, with today's topic being gun control. We will look at issues such as the Columbine, Sandy Hook, Aurora, Colorado, and even Orlando. We will ask questions such as, have the liberals taken the gun control laws too far? We have different issues to look at throughout the show, and we will challenge the way that you believe and what you believe to be true. So stay tuned. We're just moments away. Hello, welcome back to the new show, Paradigm Shift. I'm your host, Sabrina Rice. Here with me now is our star of the show, Ray McBerry. Ray is a former Republican candidate for governor of Georgia and one of the leading spokesmen for constitutional and states' rights for nearly 2 decades now. Ray has also been seen on many shows such as CNN, Fox News, HLN, and MSNBC, as well as hundreds of other radio and television stations across the U.S. So Ray, let's start from the beginning. From where does the right to keep and bear arms originate from?
Unfortunately, there are a lot of Americans who have been brainwashed into believing that the right to keep and bear arms is the right that we're given by the government.
Right.
The government doesn't have the authority to give us the right to keep and bear arms. The right to keep and bear arms is a God-given right. Those who are not Christians would call it a natural right. It's a right that we're born with. It's an inalienable right, as Thomas Jefferson said in the Declaration of Independence. When he was enumerating those inalienable rights in the Declaration of Independence, he said the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He was echoing the words of the famous philosopher John Locke, who said life, liberty, and property. But that inalienable right of life and liberty, and therefore our property, means that I have a right to protect myself and those rights, those things. I also have the right to defend those things that belong not only to me, but to my family. And so that right to keep and bear arms in defense of life, liberty, and property is an extension of those inalienable rights in the Declaration of Independence, and they're given to us by God. Because they are given to us by God, that's what makes them inalienable. Inalienable means you can't take them away from someone, and neither can the person voluntarily give them up if they choose. So an innocent person always has those inalienable rights of life, liberty, and property. And the defense of those is given to us by God.
So let's talk about the actual wording of the Second Amendment.
Well, the Second Amendment itself, of course, says that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. But some people get hung up on the fact that it says that it's given to us because it's essential, it's necessary, that we have a well-regulated militia. And people say, well, you know, the militia is the armed forces. So yes, the Army has a right to keep and bear arms, but that doesn't mean you and I as individuals in our homes have a right to keep and bear arms. Nothing could be further from the truth. The militia is not the military. The militia is not the standing army. At the time that the Second Amendment was added to the Constitution, these are the very same men who had just fought a war with Great Britain for our independence in 1776 to 1783. So they knew what it was like to go up against a standing army, and they knew that in order to defend our liberties and our freedoms, we not only had to have, yes, maybe an army to protect against foreign invasion, but greater still was the threat to our liberties from tyrants right here at home within our own government. Just as they had fought a war with the King of England because he infringed upon their God-given rights and liberties, they knew the day may very well come when here in America we would also have to defend our rights and liberties against the infringement on those rights by a tyrannical government as well. And so as a result, they put the Second Amendment in the Constitution, and it says that we need a well-regulated militia. Well, the militia is simply us, the people. And so the citizens are the militia. In fact, the Georgia Constitution says that all males from age 18 to 45, I believe, make up the official militia of Georgia. So whether you think you're part of the militia or not, whether you want to be part of the militia or not, if you're a man who's capable of bearing arms, you not only have the right, you have the duty to bear arms in case we ever need that, either from protection from a foreign invader or from an out-of-control federal government infringing upon our rights.
Wow. So in the Second Amendment, it does state, the infringement of, how does that relate to gun laws as far as the right to bear arms?
Sabrina, the part of the Second Amendment that says shall not be infringed, the word infringed means to restrict in some way.
Right.
The Second Amendment that was given to us by the Founding Fathers could not be more clear. It plainly says that the federal government has no authority whatsoever to restrict our right to keep and bear arms. So all of these gun control laws that have been passed by Congress, all of the federal gun control laws are unconstitutional. Now, I know that the current U.S. Supreme Court isn't going to rule that, but it is the way that it is, based on what the Constitution says. And the Founding Fathers intended that so that we would have the necessary implements of war, if necessary, to defend our liberties even against an out-of-control government that we put in power. And so not infringing on those rights means all of those federal gun control laws that are currently on the books, they're all null and void as far as the Constitution is concerned.
So many gun control proponents argue in favor of the restrictions on such weapons such as assault rifles and weapons of that such. Do you really feel that an individual needs one of those type of weapons necessarily?
Well, again, Sabrina, if we go back to the original intent of the Founding Fathers when they wrote the Second Amendment, the Second Amendment really has nothing to do with having firearms to go duck hunting.
Right.
That's not what the amendment was for. The liberals in America today want us to believe that, yes, okay, maybe we can agree that you have the right to own firearms, but the only reason you have any right to own a firearm is for sporting purposes.
Right.
It's the same thing that the Nazis used as their excuse to restrict gun rights in Nazi Germany in the 1930s with the Nuremberg gun laws. And it's the same argument being used in America today. Well, the truth is, the intent of our Founding Fathers when they wrote the Second Amendment and they ratified the Second Amendment was that we would have access to weapons, that I would own weapons, that if I was put in a situation where I had to defend the liberties of myself, my family, and my fellow citizens against an out-of-control, tyrannical government,
Right.
I would have the same type of military firearms that I would be facing on the battlefield potentially from an army being controlled by the tyrants in Washington, D.C. And so the Second Amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear arms of the same grade and level of firearms that would be used by infantry in the Army if they were attacking us to take away our liberties, because that's the purpose of the Second Amendment. It has nothing to do with duck hunting, and it really has nothing to do with the burglar trying to break into my home,
Right.
although it's nice to have a gun when that happens too.
Of course.
It is the defense of my liberties against an out-of-control federal government if they should ever try to seize our liberties unlawfully.
Now, some of the other, well-known haters, such as Piers Morgan, argue, that basically that guns increase crime. What is your take on that?
Well, I would have to say, as a Christian, bad morals is what increases crime. And anytime you have someone who has, they've made a decision that they're going to commit a crime, whatever it is, they're going to find whatever implements they have to find in order to use force on those victims that they can take whatever they want. So in those places where firearms have been banned, outlawed, what you're left with are the law-abiding citizens that respect the laws of the land. They follow the laws, and they're totally disarmed, totally defenseless. They're victims sitting there waiting to be victimized. The only people that end up with guns or other weapons in that instance are those who don't care about the laws, don't follow the laws anyway, and they're going to get access to a weapon of some sort.
Right.
And so it just leaves the law-abiding people victims waiting to be victimized. So the people having access to firearms only gives them an opportunity to defend themselves. And it is the knowledge of criminals that I have a firearm in my home that makes it a lot less likely that they're going to come through the door of my house at 4 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning. Because if they do, they're going to face a hail of firestorm when they come through the door. And those who are disarmed are just victims waiting to be victimized.
Well, we have a lot more interesting things to come your way. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the brand new show, Paradigm Shift. Today, we will challenge the way that you look at the U.S. and world events and then dare you to face the truth. Today, we're talking about gun control. Should we have stricter laws on the books, or have the liberals already gone too far? Shedding the light on this subject today is our star of the show, Ray McBerry. So, Ray, is it true that government officials have actually even said that Americans need to be brainwashed in order to accept gun control laws?
Yes, believe it or not, a very high-ranking government official is on record in front of the cameras as actually saying that Americans need to be transformed mentally into being willing to give up their firearms, even if they have to be brainwashed.
Wow.
This was none other than former Attorney General Eric Holder. He was appointed by Barack Hussein Obama as the U.S. Attorney General. And even worse than Janet Reno, Eric Holder is very anti-gun, anti-American freedom. He's the worst Attorney General ever in the history of these United States. But in a speech a number of years ago, he literally said, with the cameras rolling, that we need to change America's opinions about owning guns, even if it means brainwashing them. And I think what I would argue is that what we're seeing coming out of Washington today, and some of the supposed shootings that have occurred and things related to those, is that the government is trying to brainwash the American people. And we'll talk about that more as we go on in this segment.
Things that are going to grab the attention of these kids and change, as I said, the way in which they think about guns. And so what I've asked is that the creative community in Washington, those ad agencies that create these snappy ads and make me buy things that I don't really need, devote that talent in a more constructive way so we can get at the minds of these young people. This informational campaign, I've also called on the newspapers and the television stations to devote to us time and space so that we can get these ads, so we can use these spots, and not to give us 1, 2 o'clock in the morning ads when nobody's watching, but at the time when people, particularly young people, are watching television, so that when they're watching, you know, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or Martin or whatever else they watch, and yeah, I watch those things once in a while, so that they'll see these ads and they'll be grabbed by these ads. I've also asked people who have influence over youngsters, entertainers, athletes, to be involved in this program as well. But not only them, community leaders, Jesse Jackson, Mayor Barry, people who have credibility with young people should be on the television, on the radio, as much as we possibly can, and telling these youngsters that it's wrong to carry a gun, and that if you have information about people who are carrying guns, you've got to share that with Chief Thomas and with his people as well. I've also asked the school board to make a part of every day some kind of anti-violence, anti-gun message. Every day, every school, at every level. One thing that I think is clear with young people and with adults as well is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it every Monday. We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way. and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
Well, can you give us some examples of the brainwashing effects that maybe they project to do upon Americans?
Yes, some of the incidents that have occurred, the supposed shootings, when the facts are all checked, what you find is that the shootings either didn't happen at all, or if they did happen, they were with very different situations than what we were presented by the news media and by the government. One example, of course, is the Sandy Hook supposed shootings that took place several years ago, in which there were 20 children supposedly killed, several adults, and yet when all the facts are verified, there's no basis, no support to believe that any actual shooting took place that day in Newtown, Connecticut. We've actually done 2 previous shows on the Georgia First show here on KBN television, which lays out all of the facts of the case as they were presented by the government and by the media in the day of the shooting and following. And when that is compared to the evidence that's been discovered, it's very likely there was no shooting that took place at all. Even in some of the recent shootings that have taken place, we're being led to believe one set of facts about the case when the truth is it's totally separate. And so the government is intentionally trying to create this atmosphere in America where shootings are taking place, and of course the violence is blamed on the guns, as though the gun could get up and fire itself. When in reality, it all goes back to what Eric Holder said. Those who are in positions of power in our government today are dead set on taking away our firearms, even if they have to brainwash the American people to do it.
And some of these laws didn't even originate here in the U.S.
That's true.
Can you tell us a little bit about maybe where they did originate from?
Yes, as shocking as it might be to some people watching the show, the gun control laws that are being passed in America today are word for word the exact same gun laws that were passed by Nazi Germany in 1936 as part of the Nuremberg gun laws, or 1938 maybe. But the Nuremberg gun laws placed restrictions, number one, on the types of firearms that could be owned, the types of ammunition that could be owned, who could own a firearm, and then even if you passed those restrictions, you still had to be placed on a list, a registration list, so that the government knew who had the weapons, where they were, and what types of firearms they were. The wording in those Nuremberg gun laws passed in Nazi Germany in the 1930s are word for word exactly the same as the gun control bill that was passed by the United States Congress in 1968 or somewhere thereabouts. They didn't even change the words. If you take the German law and translate it into English, it's the exact same wording as the U.S. gun bill. Wow. And so it's obvious that those who are trying to take away our liberties are National Socialists. They're Nazis doing the same thing in America that they did in Germany in the 1930s.
So, you know, we've heard horror stories about the government trying to actually take firearms away from America. Does that have anything to do with like Hurricane Katrina or any other, you know, recent events such like that?
Well, Sabrina, the government they're preparing for the day when they try to take all of our firearms away. But they have used crisis situations, as they always do. We talk about the Hegelian Dialectic on this show regularly. But they use crisis situations as their experimental periods of seizing firearms from Americans. During Hurricane Katrina, down in Louisiana and the Gulf Coast area several years ago, one of the worst storms on record, and there were many places around the Gulf Coast region where communications were cut, phone lines were out, roads were out in many instances, and there were many situations where local police officers and sheriff's departments could not have been able to respond to people to help them if they had needed their help. So you also had people going around vandalizing people's homes, breaking into people's homes, because they knew there were a lot of people that had evacuated the area. A lot of homes were empty. And even those people that were in their homes They had no access to the sheriff's department for protection, for help. So a lot of people were that were still in their homes in that area that had their own firearms. They were able to defend themselves and their property against these vandals and these thieves that were going around. Well, FEMA and the federal government was sending agents around to individuals' homes, literally knocking on the door and asking them if they had firearms. These are law-abiding citizens in their own homes, and if they had firearms, the federal agents were confiscating the weapons of law-abiding citizens, and at the worst possible time when they had no other means of protecting themselves. Now, what any governor should have said when all this was going on is, you know, you can let this go on in your state if you want to, but in my state, any federal agent that's caught confiscating weapons from a law-abiding citizen in my state is going to find himself sitting in a Georgia jail waiting for somebody to come bail him out, because the Second Amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear arms, and the federal agents were using this as an experiment to see if they could get away with confiscating the weapons of Americans. Sadly enough, there were too many parishes and counties where sheriffs and police chiefs let them confiscate their people's weapons. And praise God, there were some sheriffs who stood up for their citizens and said, you're not doing it in our county or our parish. And reportedly, there were even sheriff's deputies who drew down on federal agents to stop them from doing these things.
So now, would you correlate other more recent mass shootings to this as well? Or how would you go about, you know?
Yes, Sabrina, you know, we've already talked about the Sandy Hook incident. We constantly get a lot of requests for doing another show on that. We've done 2 in the past. I don't know if we'll do another show on that, but it's available on the website. People can go and watch both of those if they want to. The Sandy Hook is not the only one of the recent mass shootings that is very questionable, very suspect, whether it even happened at all, certainly not the way they told us that it happened. Another one is the supposed Batman shooting out in Aurora, Colorado. When you look at what supposedly happened that night, the facts just don't add up. And I know that the young man that was put on trial and convicted, you know, there was a supposed trial that took place, but his lawyers were forbidden from presenting some of the evidence that really should have been presented. When you look at the evidence and the facts in light of what happened or is reported to have happened that night, there's no way that it could have happened the way that the official story goes. So whether it happened and it just happened a different way, or whether it maybe was just staged and somebody else did the shooting, maybe even federal agents, we don't know, because the facts just don't line up with what the official story is. But given the fact that we know officials in the government have already said with their own mouths that they intend to take our guns, even if they have to brainwash us to do it, knowing that they've said that and that it's their agenda, who would not believe that they would not go to the extent of even staging events in order to have a pretext for taking away our weapons? I think that's what's going on in America today.
So what do you believe is the ultimate goal of gun control?
Well, the ultimate goal of gun control is the same here that it has been in every other place that it's ever been put into place, and that is so that the government can incrementally continue to seize more and more of our liberties, our freedoms, and ultimately the Second Amendment is the guardian of all our other freedoms. So once our right to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government is gone, we'll be defenseless, and they can then take away our right to freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, and any other freedoms they want to take if we can't defend those liberties with the right to keep and bear arms.
Well, folks, that'll do it for another exciting episode of Paradigm Shift, the show that will challenge the way that you look at the U.S. and other world events. Today we had a very interesting topic on gun control, and a lot of the interesting facts that we learned today may have even shocked some of you. I want you to stay tuned and also join us on our Facebook page at kbntelevision.com. Until then, I'm your host, Sabrina Rice, and remember, the truth will make you free.